Redlick, thank you for being patient, starting a little late. Couple big things to talk about today. We're going to start with, are we here? Are we here? Jesus. I can't tell whether YouTube is working or not. Okay, so hey, this is Warren Redlick. Let me start recording. Okay, hey, this is Warren Redlick. We're going to start talking about, the big topic is going to be what's going on in Delaware for this video. That's going to be the big topic that we're going to talk about. I'm going to start by talking about Dojo. But before I dive into, I just want to say, if you're here for the Delaware content, when you see stuff like this on the screen, if you want to move ahead on the video, when you see something like this on the screen, white text, white document with black text on it, that's documents from the case, Delaware, Tornetta versus Musk, the case that's pending in Delaware. I'm going to start out, and this won't be that long, talking about what I think is probably bigger news, is Tesla's development of its AI data center in Texas. So we're going to talk about this first and then dive into Delaware next. So there was these pictures that are coming out of Tesla building this massive cooling structure outside of Giga Texas, which someone referred to as a giant GPU cooler, and Elon jokingly said, "We're nothing without our fans." It's the scale of the cooling that's going to be necessary to cool the amount of computer processing that's happening inside this addition to Giga Texas is going to be insane. And Elon provided some more detail. There was talk about sizing for, this is kind of critical, I think, sizing for 130 megawatts of power and cooling this year, but will increase to greater than 500 megawatts over the next 18 months or so. Elon said it's mostly hardware for some, Omar's catalog said half Dojo, half Nvidia. And Elon said mostly hardware for some Dojo. And then hardware 5, which has been renamed to AI 5 in the second half of next year. The Tesla AI 5 computer has 10x the capability of hardware 4 computer, and Tesla makes the whole software stack. So I'm not quite clear. Aiming about for half Tesla AI hardware and half Nvidia and others. So the Tesla AI hardware is not Dojo primarily. It's hardware 5 or AI 5, which is inference compute. And I want to dive into this a little bit. I've talked about this before, but I think people struggle with it. I've seen people who I think should understand better, but it's just a hard concept to understand. The chip in the car, that if you drive a Tesla car, the chip in the car is an inference chip. That's hardware 3. So hardware 4 and hardware 5, now AI 5, are inference chips. They're the kind of thing that can run a car. They're the kind of thing that can run Optimus. What an inference chip does is, and then also when you're using ChatGPT or Grok, you submit a prompt, it responds fairly quickly. That's inference compute. The inference compute is trained to respond to input. It might be text input or document input or image input in ChatGPT or a chatbot like that, an LLM like that. Or it might be photons coming in the cameras. And then inputs from, in some cases, inputs from the driver, although you don't get a lot of inputs from the driver, but you're getting input from the real world as it's happening, and you need a real-time or near real-time response. That's inference compute. Training compute, which is Dojo and the Nvidia supercomputers primarily, the A100s, H100s, Blackwell, training compute trains the inference chip. So you need training compute to be able to look at all the data that's been generated and use your compute to say, what's the best way that we want our chips to respond to this, right? But inference compute is, this is how we were programmed to respond. And you could kind of think of it as muscle memory. Like you're playing tennis and the ball is hit. You don't spend time thinking about how am I going to respond to this. You have half a second to react, and you respond based on muscle memory and reaction time to hit the ball back. Or you're driving a car and somebody runs out in front of the road. You don't think, gee, what should I do? You stop, right? You react quickly to things, and that's inference compute in your brain. But when you go to sleep at night, your brain is looking at all this experience it had during the day, and it may retrain your body how to react in the future to events that happen. So I think that may help explain it. So inference compute is really important. I've seen estimates that inference compute is 50% or more of AI compute. I think James Douma said it's like 90 to 95% of AI compute is inference compute. So, you think about it, the cars you're driving, you've got 6 million Tesla cars driving with inference computers making decisions. Compare that to the supercomputer center with, a far smaller number of GPUs making training decisions, although they run 24/7. So inference, and I believe the purpose of inference compute, and I've got a post here. AI 5, hardware 5 is about far more than self-driving cars. Okay, people think, well, it's not going to drive itself until we have hardware 5. And it's going to drive itself on hardware 3. Hardware 4 is certainly going to be capable of robotaxi operation. But AI 5, the hardware 5 chip, is not really about self-driving cars anymore. And I said it here, and Elon said, yeah, AI 5 is for Optimus. Optimus is a much more challenging inference compute problem than driving, and I'll explain that in a minute. And it's for large-scale inference compute, which I'll also explain. So if you think about it, a car is driven, you're driving in a certain space. It's a two-dimensional world, basically. There's some three-dimensional aspects to it, but it's primarily a two-dimensional world. And you're staying on the roads. You don't really drive through a forest. You don't typically drive on the beach. You don't go in an elevator, typically. The driving space is much simpler than the space that Optimus will operate in. Optimus is going to operate in a much more complex space. The car only drives. It doesn't manipulate objects. It navigates space, but it does not manipulate objects. Optimus will navigate space, much more complicated space. And although it doesn't have to react as quickly because it's not going 85 miles an hour, but still, Optimus navigates much more complex space. And Optimus is going to be manipulating objects. Optimus is going to have something like 22 degrees of freedom in its hands. So the complexity of motion for Optimus will be much greater than the complexity of motion for a car, which is basically left, right, forward, back, faster, slower. There's not a lot of degrees of freedom in a car's motion. There's a lot more degrees of freedom in Optimus's motion. And Optimus isn't necessarily going to have lane lines to follow. So the game for Optimus is much more complicated. And that's why the AI 5 chip is, maybe necessary for Optimus to reach its full capability. Although I think it does pretty well. I think it may be running on hardware 3, the early Optimus. Maybe they're using hardware 4 now. So they're able to do a lot on the existing hardware, but the capability is much greater with Optimus. And then you go to large-scale inference compute, and this is challenging, and I'm going to go with, I don't fully understand this, but when the training compute says, okay, here's the new way that we want the inference computers to respond to, input, to video coming in or people asking questions, there's an intermediate step between sending that to the cars. You send it to your large-scale inference compute and this is my theory. I'm not saying I know this. I think this makes sense. You have your large-scale inference compute in your data center, and you run a bunch of simulations through your large-scale inference compute, and you see if the cars do well with those simulations. That's what I think. Oh, by the way, Cybertruck t-shirt is at elonbits.com. Thank you to Mark Potocnik for promoting all of this, for supporting me, for moderating the chat, etc. So, and I don't see Mark Plott there. I don't see Jim Whitehead there, but they're usually in the chat occasionally as moderators, if not often. So, so that's the news about the data center, about Tesla's AI compute. I think there's this big question about what's the value of large-scale inference compute? What's the value of train? Let's say FSD is solved, which I don't think FSD is ever completely solved. I think they're going to continue to iterate and continue to improve it. But, if they get robotaxi operating in the US in 2025, then they'll have robotaxi operating pretty much around the world by 2028. By 2030, the need for training the cars to drive better will be there, but it won't be that demanding anymore. And there's going to be a hell of a lot more compute at that point. Now, Optimus is probably going to have a long-term need for a lot of training over a long period of time, because you're going to have a lot of levels of Optimus learning to do things. There's so much for Optimus to do. So that's a big chunk of it. I think there's other uses for inference compute, and there's this question about whether Tesla will be able to sell access to inference compute and access to AI training compute, and I don't know how to value that. I don't know if that's worth a lot or it's worth a little. I don't know if it compares to the value of Robotaxi or the value of selling Optimus or leasing Optimus out. I don't think it does. I think it's valuable, but maybe not that valuable. And I think the competitive space with Nvidia and OpenAI and all these competitors in the AI space, there's a lot. Like, I think Tesla has a massive lead in Robotaxi and has a massive lead in humanoid robots. I don't think Tesla's going to have a massive lead in AI compute. And I think that's going to be a very competitive space. It's going to be a lot there. So that may end up being not highly profitable. The margins may not be that great in the long run. In the short run, the margins may be high, but in the long run, I don't think the margins will be that high. The profit won't be that high. And I could be wrong. That's my rough understanding of that. The last thing I want to bring up from Elon's posts is I posted this, and I'll go into why I said this. The plaintiff law firm suing Tesla in Delaware opposes a large performance-based compensation for Elon. And there's specific stuff I'm going to talk about coming up. So we're in the Delaware portion of the video now, although here's the document, right? We're in the Delaware portion of the video now. So the plaintiff's law firm, and I'll get into this, essentially one of their fundamental core positions is, and I think the judge bought it in her first decision, and there's this professor, Charles Elson, who advocates this, and the plaintiff's law firm specifically invokes Charles Elson. He's a professor. He's going to appear a few times in the course of this video. He basically argues that this large-scale performance-based compensation should not be allowed, period, whether the shareholders approve it or not. And yet, the plaintiff's law firm wants large performance-based compensation for themselves in their legal fee. And I think that's effed up. And Elon called them, I think he meant hypocritical parasites. But it's really striking that they're criticizing Elon for criticizing the compensation package, which is essentially the largest compensation package in history. In effect, at the end of the day, it becomes a super large compensation package. At the time it was approved, it was a big compensation package potentially, but it wasn't that crazy large. Now, these lawyers want the largest legal fee in history by a lot. And they don't see a conflict in that at all. And we'll see if the judge sees a conflict. I haven't seen Charles Elson say he sees a conflict in that at all. So we want large performance-based compensation for plaintiffs' lawyers, but we don't want large performance-based compensation for people who actually do something useful for society. And I'm a lawyer. When I criticize them for that, there you go. So you have the shareholder vote. Shareholders voted yes on Elon's compensation package, and this is the trigger. I anticipated this was coming. This did come. It came. I think this was filed on the 20th, and the documents filed by the plaintiff were filed on the 21st. It is the 22nd here in Thailand, but I think it's still the 21st in the United States. So this was filed yesterday for you, and the plaintiff's documents I'm showing were filed today for you. If you're watching live, effing ambulance chasers. Listen. Lawyers don't chase ambulances anymore. We keep emergency medical technicians and paramedics on retainer. We tell them, listen, you bring us the injured people, we'll give you money. Emergency room doctors, emergency room nurses, we don't have to chase the ambulances anymore. We let the ambulance people come to us later. It's much more efficient. Do we cheat them, and how? We do it right. We do cheat them, and how. So this is the motion that Tesla just submitted on the 20th, asking the court they're saying that the ratification vote by any measure impacts significantly what remains to be decided in this litigation. Defendants is Tesla and the board and Elon, contend the consequences of the ratification alter the course of this litigation and any relief that is potentially available, and relatedly, any attorney's fees that may be awarded to plaintiff's counsel, and thus cannot be ignored in an action that is supposed to advance the best interests of the company. And they want the scope of the ratification's impact briefed expeditiously and decided before this court rules on the two issues contemplated by the scheduling order, plaintiff's motion for award of attorney's fees, and the form of any final judgment. The term final judgment is surprisingly important. We're going to get to that. That's coming. Okay, because there's judgment and there's final judgment. Are they different? Unclear. So, Tesla shareholders voted to ratify the compensation plan. Most important, this is critical in my opinion. Most important, they had before them in its entirety. They go through all the information that shareholders had for the new vote because the court's criticism was that the shareholders were not fully informed on the 2018 vote. So, most important, they had before them in its entirety this court's comprehensive critique of the 2018 compensation plan in its 200-page post-trial opinion, as well as the extensive news coverage of the opinion. They still chose to overwhelmingly ratify the plan. I think it was more than 70%. We have a number here. And they specifically mentioned how BlackRock and Vanguard, some of the most sophisticated institutional investors in the world, voted for the plan. Vanguard had voted against the plan previously and voted for it now. Now, I personally think, and I don't know this for sure, that Vanguard and BlackRock waited to, feel the wind, feel how the wind was blowing, and only voted for the compensation plan after they realized it was going to pass. That's my theory. I don't know. I'm not sure. So, and this is what the Tesla's submission was fairly short. They basically indicated they want to discuss how are we going to proceed, and we want to make a motion, but we want to discuss what form of motion we're going to make, how this is going to work out. Defendants submit that ratification vote has controlling and preclusive effect and must be given effect by this court. A foundational principle of Delaware law is that the stockholder franchise is the cornerstone of corporate governance and that the will of the stockholders as owners of the company should be respected. Okay, now let me be clear. Charles Elson does not think that stockholder will should control the company. Charles Elson and the plaintiff's law firm, and so far the judge, think that the decisions about how a company is controlled should be made by law professors and plaintiff's lawyers and judges, and that shareholders and boards should be cut out. And this is critical for the future of the state of Delaware. It's important for Tesla. Like this, I think whatever happens with Tesla going forward, that stuff's going to work itself out. But Tesla will be fine. Elon will be fine. We'll be fine as shareholders long term. We're going to be okay. And by the way, out of concern about the risk of a shareholder vote no, which I would take as a no confidence vote in Elon, I had sold 20% of this. It was a little less than 20% of the stock that I own in Tesla. I have, in the last few days, I bought back almost all the stock that I sold. The share price went up a little bit. I didn't have to cash to buy the same amount, but I now have slightly more than 99% of the stock that I held before. So Jupiter James says, does the approval to move incorporation to Texas take the whole case out of Delaware's jurisdiction? No, everything that happened while Tesla was a Delaware corporation. The move to Texas itself can be challenged in Delaware courts because that happened while Tesla was a Delaware corporation. So yeah. Okay. So let's move on. We're going to dive into how the plaintiff responds. So the plaintiff says the purported ratification is an extrajudicial scheme that has no effect on the court's merits judgment. And this is critical. We're going to get to it here. Following trial, the court entered judgment for plaintiff and ordered rescission of the grant. Tesla admits, as it must, that the opinion was a final judgment on the merits rescinding the grant. Tesla can only challenge that judgment. This is a procedural argument. The purported ratification cannot reinstate the grant, has no effect on the court's judgment, blah, blah, blah. Now, here's what the court actually wrote. Sorry. Here's what the court actually wrote. For the foregoing reasons, judgment is entered in the plaintiff's favor. The parties are to confer on a form of final order implementing this decision. Now, to me, that's not a final judgment. Now, listen, I was a trial lawyer. I'm basically retired now, but technically I'm still a lawyer in New York. I was never a lawyer in Delaware. I never practiced there as this area of law, but this is something called civil procedure, and I did 50 jury trials and a bunch of appeals and other things. I don't think this is a final judgment. I think this is a judgment, but it's not a final judgment until there's a final order. I don't know how that's going to play out procedurally in Delaware. And we're going to talk about that a bit. How much flexibility does the judge have to deal with this? Right? So the plaintiffs then say the ratification is a legally baseless gimmick. Okay, so let's be clear, folks. You as shareholders, your vote is a gimmick. It is a legally baseless gimmick. This is what's driving, and I'm going to talk later in this video about the problems this creates for the state of Delaware in terms of corporations deciding not to incorporate there and to move their incorporation elsewhere, and the damage that does to the state of Delaware and to Delaware lawyers. But the idea that a shareholder vote is a legally baseless gimmick, and think about the effort that went into this, the volume of material that Tesla prepared, the lawyers that they hired, the work that was done to get this shareholder vote together, and they're calling it a legally baseless gimmick. I don't feel as a shareholder that this was a legally baseless gimmick. These guys see the lawsuit as more important than the company. They purport to act in the interest of Tesla's shareholders while saying shareholders don't get a say, while saying the lawsuit is more important, right, than what the company actually does. That's what's really striking about the degree of disregard for boards of directors, companies, and shareholders that is evinced by the way they talk about this, right? And I'm not saying they're alone, by the way. I don't think they're alone. I think this is I'm not saying it's a majority view in Delaware, but it is a significant view in Delaware that shareholders don't control companies, that boards of directors don't control companies, and that ultimately plaintiffs' lawyers and law professors and judges decide how companies should be controlled. And if that's the prevailing view, then that's going to create massive problems for Delaware, as corporations have already started leaving, and new corporations will not be formed in Delaware anywhere near the volume that they were before. If you're a startup founder, do you want to locate in Delaware after seeing this? Like, if you're a startup founder, you probably idolize Elon Musk to some extent. You probably appreciate, wow, this guy's one of the most successful startup founders ever. If he doesn't think Delaware is a great place to locate, and you can see plain and simple that the Delaware courts do not like him and do not treat him well, do you want to locate in Delaware? If I'm starting up a company, I'm not incorporating in Delaware. So respectfully, there can be no serious dispute that the ratification has no legal effect on any aspect of this action, including the fee petition. Well, so the thing is, if at some level the shareholders are going to approve the same compensation package, then the plaintiffs haven't delivered any benefit to shareholders. Whether it's the 2024 vote we just had or there's a vote in 2025, it is now apparent that shareholders are going to approve the compensation package, whether it's in Delaware or Texas. At some point, Elon's going to get the shares. He's going to get the options. The value is going to be transferred to Elon. So what value did these plaintiffs' lawyers generate for Tesla? They generated negative value. They created a ton of work. They created a legal lawfare, as Elon calls it, a war on Tesla that cost Tesla money and cost Tesla time and cost Tesla resources, but did not increase the value of the shares. Right? They're not making shareholders better off. They're trying to make themselves better off, not make shareholders better off. And this is critical. I don't think the judge is going to see that part of it. I think the judge might see some other things. But when I look at this, like they say, the ratification is a transparent attempt to score a public relations victory, pressure the court and delay proceedings. Well, it's definitely to pressure the court and to affect proceedings in the action, for sure. It's transparent that they wanted to affect the fees. Public relations victory. What public relations victory? The shareholders said, yes, this isn't just public relations. Perhaps so defendants can deploy additional gambits that will needlessly complicate matters and consume further precious judicial resources. These are the plaintiffs' lawyers saying, we want our money, we want our money, we want our money. Don't make us wait any more time to get our money. We want billions of dollars that come out of Tesla. We want it in our pockets now, and we don't want it delayed by anything like what the shareholders actually want. 95% of lawyers give the rest of them a bad name. No, that's not really true. I would say that the vast majority of lawyers are good and help people and care about doing the right thing. And there's a small percentage of lawyers that are bad and do bad things. And in some cases, they become more influential than they should be. So, tellingly in its proxy materials, the board felt compelled to concede it could not predict with certainty how a vote to ratify the grant would be treated under Delaware law under these novel circumstances, and then even a favorable vote by our shareholders to ratify the grant may not fully resolve the matter. Yes, Tesla was honest about that. They argue that the ratification is a legal nullity for at least 7 reasons. I'm going to go through that quick. But before I do, notice that the judge, there's some language that the judge used in her decision that I think is important. What she did, rescission is her saying the shareholder grant is what the shareholder vote in 2018, the compensation package is rescinded, rescission. It's over, just totally wiped out. She said the remedy of rescission restores the parties substantially the position which they occupied before making the contract. It is not given for every serious mistake and is neither given nor withheld automatically, but is awarded as a matter of judgment, and the court has broad discretion to award rescission when the facts and circumstances warrant. Well, the facts and circumstances have changed. And if the court has broad decision to award rescission under one set of facts and circumstances, when the facts and circumstances change, if the court still has broad discretion, the court can undo its decision to award rescission. This is critical language from the court decision that happened before that led to the shareholder vote. So going through the plaintiff's reasons, as Tesla admits, the court has already entered judgment for the plaintiff and ordered rescission. They claim that this is the procedural argument. Tesla can only challenge that judgment through a motion under Rules 59 or 60 or through appeal. Well, they may be intending to make a motion through Rules 59 and 60. I don't know. Tesla representative who will obey the court's final judgment on the merits. There's some letter that was submitted when Tesla started its shareholder vote for 2024. I believe the plaintiffs moved to stop the shareholder vote because we don't want the shareholder like if it isn't more clear, the plaintiff's law firm does not want shareholders to have a say in how the company is run. They don't want the shareholders to have a say in whether they get paid. Right? They claim to be representing the interests of shareholders, but they don't want shareholders to have a say in whether they get paid and how much they get paid. Right? They claim to represent shareholders, but they oppose the shareholders and how they vote. So, as mentioned above, in response to the motions, Tesla representative will obey the court's final judgment on the merits. Again, I don't agree that it was a final judgment. I suspect that Tesla's going to argue that's not really a final judgment. I don't think it's a final judgment until it's entered, until there's a final order. It might have been a judgment, but it wasn't a final judgment because there's no final order. Now, yeah, that's like splitting hairs. That's like semantics, but it does matter. I think it matters. And unfortunately, does procedure matter more than substance? And when you're the lawyers and you want to get your multi-billion-dollar fee, procedure matters more than substance. They don't care about the substance. They don't care about what's in the interest of Tesla shareholders, the company, the world. They care about getting paid. So honestly, I read their responses like a stuck pig, like they're screaming, "Oh my God, we're going to lose all our money." They don't give a fuck about us. They don't give a fuck about the shareholders. They don't give one flying fuck about the shareholder. It could not be more transparent that these guys do not care about us. They care about getting paid. They don't care about the interests of corporations. They don't care about corporate governance. They don't care about any of that. They care about getting paid. That's all this is to them. So, and the court, so they had made motions to basically stop the shareholder vote, and the court denied the motions based on Tesla's representations that it wasn't going to affect things. Now, I didn't read that particular letter. I don't know exactly what they said. I'm sure they're going to say, well, wait a minute, things change now, whatever. As Tesla previously affirmatively represented, the ratification is irrelevant to the court's post-trial judgment and plaintiff's fee petition. Again, I haven't read those words. The court was successfully induced by Tesla to adopt that position in dismissing their motion. I don't know how significant that is. And therefore, Tesla is stopped from claiming the ratification vacates the judgment. Well, we don't know exactly what Tesla's asking for. They haven't said we're trying to vacate the judgment yet. We don't know exactly what they're seeking. It may be that they're seeking, hey, you rescinded the previous shareholder award. We have a new award. We have a new vote from our shareholders. We want you to recognize the new award. And then that has implications for what happens with the attorney's fee. We don't, because they haven't made their motion yet. We don't know what their motion is yet. The court has already ruled in this action that giving the inherent coercive influence and a conflicted controller transaction, this is their second argument here, A ratification vote cannot relieve defendants of the burden to prove entire fairness, which they failed to prove. So this entire fairness thing, and this gets into this, you see Professor Elson here. Professor Elson essentially argues, let me pull up, where do I have Elson? Okay, Elson, this is the document that Elson filed in the earlier decision. He basically said the court should find that the terms of Musk's award were unfair. He's basically arguing, I'm not getting into full detail here, but he's basically arguing, Elson, that you can't give this much compensation for performance to a CEO. You just can't do it. He does not believe in large-scale equity compensation for performance-based equity compensation for CEOs. Period. That's the language that I read from Elson's paperwork, from what he said in other circumstances. And he's criticizing how other companies are starting to adopt similar executive compensation packages for CEOs, and he believes this is wrong. And he doesn't care. If the board thinks it's a good thing, he doesn't care if the shareholders think it's a good thing. Professor Elson, the plaintiff's law firm, and so far the judge think that shareholders and boards, CEOs should not run their companies, that law professors and plaintiffs' lawyers and judges should decide how CEOs are compensated, not shareholders. And this is the problem this is a fundamental problem that's facing Delaware, and why companies are going to, why new startups are not going to form in Delaware, and why existing startups are going to leave Delaware and other companies are leaving Delaware. We'll cover all that later. So, sorry, it's this one. So they're saying that fundamentally, like what Elson said, the package is unfair. It was paying Elon too much. Elon was getting too much compensation. No, those of us who say, well, he 10x'd our stock, we think giving him, some percentage of the company is fair. We made our judgment. I made my judgment. We made that judgment again. You can't argue. And so the argument fundamentally is that shareholders were like there's this argument that there's inherent coercive influence and a conflicted controller transaction. This goes back to the judge's decision, and I covered this in a previous video. I think the judge made a lot of mistakes in her decision, finding that Elon was a conflicted controller. Like, Elon had 20% of the stock, sure, but they put it to a shareholder vote. Did Elon have undue control over Tesla, and did that mean that there's no way of achieving a fair contract? I think the shareholders voted. And, the claim was that the shareholders were not adequately informed. Well, you got the same vote when they were fully informed. So, a ratification vote cannot relieve defendants of the burden to prove entire fairness. In other words, if you have a controlling CEO, a CEO who has a lot of control over the company, shareholders can never give that CEO large-scale performance-based equity compensation. Under this theory, under Elson's theory, under this law firm's theory, and under the theory that the judge adopted in her earlier decision. And again, this is a theory that is toxic to Delaware, because companies are not going to locate in Delaware if they're not allowed to compensate their executive the way they want. CEO, the founder, is going to say, well, I don't want to locate in a state that doesn't let me do that. I like what Elon did. It made a lot of sense. If I can deliver that kind of value to my shareholders, I think I should be compensated well for it. And Delaware doesn't let me do that. As explained by Professor Elson, the ratification is legally invalid. Among other things, the grant does not meet the threshold definition of defective corporate act, fiduciary loyalty breaches. The fiduciary breaches, the judge concocted this idea that Robin Denholm in particular, that the directors were not independent. Murdoch, Denholm, Aaron Price, in my view, she stretched the facts. She cherry-picked the facts and stretched the facts to find. For example, Robin Denholm, she became extremely wealthy on Tesla stock, so she's not independent. She became extremely wealthy on Tesla stock after the 2018 compensation package. Tesla stock wasn't trading that high in 2018. Tesla stock went up in 2020 after she made her decision. Ira Ehrenpreis, yeah, he's friendly with Elon. He's friendly with lots of people. He's like a VC Superman. He's friends with, everyone in Silicon Valley. This is like shitting on the entire Silicon Valley business model to say that Ira Ehrenpreis is an independent. I'm ranting about some stuff that happened before, but I just want to get to this. So the grant's rescission arose from fiduciary loyalty breaches and not any failure of authorization. This is not true. The judge did say that the shareholder vote was not fully informed, and that was a critical element in her decision. So having a new shareholder vote where the shareholders are fully informed should push back on that. And then they went to a committee of one. They removed all the directors from the decision making about how to do the vote and left it with Kathleen Wilson-Thompson, who the judge previously said was independent. So now the judge is either going to have to say, okay, Kathleen Wilson-Thompson is no longer independent because now she owns a lot of Tesla stock, come up with some other nonsense. Common law ratification is unavailable because defendants... sorry, I wanted to skip over that. Okay, so fourth, Tesla has waived. You get this procedural point, a final post-trial judgment. The merits has already been entered. Judgment was entered. Was it final judgment? To me, it's not a final order. It's not a final judgment. I've covered that already. Fourth, Tesla waived its ratification argument by raising it after trial. Procedural BS. Fifth, Tesla is barred by latches. This is more procedural BS. Latches is because you did this late and you did this other things and blah 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 blah. This is basically saying it's not fair for Tesla to go ask the shareholders for their opinion again. Like latches is basically it's not fair. It's not fair that you gave the shareholders all the information that we said you didn't have before, and the shareholders still said yes. Sixth, even if a ratification vote could conceivably have any impact here, to have such impact, it would need to have been properly approved by the board before submission of the shareholders, uncoerced and fully informed. And Tesla's ratification vote fails all three requirements. Half the directors who approved the ratification were judged conflicted in the opinion as to the very grant they voted to ratify. This is after the committee of one comes up with the package. The other directors approve it. Musk coerced the vote. We knew this was coming. Musk coerced the vote by, among other things, publicly threatening and reaffirming this threat that unless he received 25% of Tesla's equity, he would usurp Tesla's corporate opportunities related to AI and robotics, which he repeatedly characterized as Tesla's essence and future. Like these guys care about Tesla's future. Acting on this threat, Musk redirected thousands of Nvidia AI chips previously reserved for Tesla to X and XAI. I think it was to XAI. So he's not getting 25% of Tesla's equity. This doesn't get him 25% of Tesla's equity. Elon's statement was that he would prefer to develop AI and robotics somewhere else if it doesn't have a path to getting 25% equity in Tesla. And I don't think Elon is completely blameless in this. Elon had 21% of Tesla stock at the time of the 2018 grant. He sold some stock to acquire X with Twitter, which is now X. I agree with Elon's reasons for the things that he did. As usual, I'm a massive Elon fanboy, but I think Elon had good reasons for doing the things he did, but he did deplete his ownership of Tesla in doing so. And now it becomes apparent he wants greater ownership of Tesla. He could have sold SpaceX to acquire Twitter. I don't think SpaceX had enough value. He made choices, and those are the choices that he made. But I don't think this is true that this threat that he get 25% of Tesla's equity. The compensation plan doesn't get him there. The compensation plan doesn't even get him to 20%. Because he has to sell stock, when he exercises the options, he has to sell some in order to pay taxes, and he ends up with maybe 18%. So this doesn't get him there. And he didn't say, I'm going to steal stuff out of Tesla. That's one of the things people are commonly saying about it. He didn't say, I'm going to take resources out of Tesla. He just said he's going to leave. He didn't even say he was going to leave, but he implied he was going to stop working himself on Tesla AI and focus on AI elsewhere, which is obviously XAI and maybe elsewhere. Then the proxy was materially false and misleading for several reasons, because they included the judge's decision that said everything you wanted the judge to say, and that was false and misleading. They included the judge's decision. The shareholders had all the information that they wanted, that you wanted them to have. Did they have other information you didn't like? Well, we're shareholders. We can make decisions. We were fully informed. We knew your view. We knew what the judge said, and we still voted yes. Under Delaware law, defendants cannot ratify breaches of loyalty by a controlling stockholding adjudicated in a post-trial judgment. Moreover, Tesla's novel and radical ratification is irreconcilable, blah, blah, blah. So, yes, this is novel, but the judge's decision was novel, and the judge acknowledged that her decision was novel. So we're in a novel. The idea that you can't do this because it hasn't been done before in a case that did something that hadn't been done before, we're in new territory. When you're in new territory, you're going to face new things. So, moving on. This matters for Delaware. And my theory, I think the judge hates Elon. Okay. And I think the judge is a Joe Biden supporter. There's a lot of history behind that. I think the judge, when judges make decisions, I'm going to oversimplify and say there's two ways of making a decision. There's the way it should be, which is hard, which is you look at all the facts, you look at all the law, you take your time and you try to figure out, okay, where do we go from here based on all the facts and all the law? That's the way it should be in theory. It's actually really hard to do it that way. The other approach, the bad approach, in my opinion, is to decide what the result you want and then interpret the facts the way you need to and interpret the law the way you need to support the result that you want. That's a results-oriented judge. That's an activist judge. And that's what I think happened here. Now, there's a middle ground where you're like, it's a really tough to sort of look at all the facts and all the law in this case and try to come up with an answer that way. So let me pick a result I think might be the right result, and let me see if the facts and the law support it. And if I go along that path and I see problems in the facts or problems in the law, then I have to back off and say, okay, what's another result? So you can have a results-oriented approach where you're like, I think this might be the right result. Let me see if I can piece it together and make that work. And here, there were facts that didn't fit. She had to find Robin Denholm not independent. She had to find Ira Ehrenpreis not independent. A fair evaluation of Ehrenpreis, and I think Murdoch as well. Murdoch was independently wealthy before this. If a director's friendly with Elon, he's not independent, it's ridiculous. So she really had to stretch facts to get the results that she wanted. And I think a fair evaluation of the facts would say, yeah, okay, they have something of a friendly relationship, but they are independent. And the idea that there had to be an adversarial negotiation. Negotiations don't have to be adversarial. That in other words, they had to be a fight about what the compensation package would be instead of a collegial, like, hey, what's a good way of handling this? How should we do this? The idea that it has to be a fight, that's not true. It doesn't have to be a fight every time every CEO negotiates with every board about how am I going to be paid. They can have a friendly negotiation. And claiming that there was no negotiation, very clearly not true on the facts. So she really stretched the facts to get to the results she wanted. And I think she's really biased. And her bias was driven by hating Elon, hating rich guys, hating successful entrepreneurs, or her connection to Biden. I don't know what drove it, but it's very clear to me that she was biased against Elon. My perspective, she was biased against Elon. Now, here's the problem. She sent shockwaves throughout the startup world and throughout the corporate world. And so now Delaware is looking at corporate law changes to favor big shareholders. Lawmakers approved Delaware corporate law change. Charles Elson is in here opposing this. Charles Elson, this really damages our reputation as being a neutral player, Charles Elson said in opposition to the bill during a hearing in the House. The Delaware legislature is like, holy shit, we're about to be fucked. If we lose all the corporations in Delaware, what the hell happens to our economy? Right? Now, the plaintiff's lawyer is fairly short-sighted and doesn't see. Now, maybe these guys are near retirement. They're like, all right, if we screw plaintiff's lawyers for the future of Delaware, tough luck, or we'll go do our lawsuits wherever. But this is devastating to the Delaware bar, to the Delaware economy. And all of a sudden, and there's no special interest. People say, oh, the APAC, that Israel's a special interest, or, whatever. China's got, controlling the government. Nobody controls the governments more than lawyers. Lawyers are the greatest special interest in the world. Doctors are up there, but because all the legislators are lawyers, and they're all friends with all the lawyers who are complaining about this stuff. So all the lawyers say, hold on a minute. Wait, what are we doing here? We don't want to drive all the corporations out of our state. So they're trying to adopt legislation to make Delaware more attractive again to corporations, and I don't think it's going to work. So, and you've got this article in the Hill, why the corporations are fleeing Delaware. Walter Isaacson said the ruling is going to hurt Delaware. Wait, you mean 5 years after something happens, 8 years after something happens, you'll go back and undo it? He asked. Yeah, people are going to leave. The founding company, like the founder of a startup is going to say, like, imagine you're a founder of a startup. And you go to your lawyer and you say, hey, I'm thinking about where we want to incorporate the company. Where should we incorporate the company? And the lawyer says, well, Delaware is where we usually incorporate people. Well, any concerns about Delaware? No, not really. You're going to fire that lawyer because you know what happened to Elon, right? No, we need to have a serious conversation. What are the advantages and disadvantages of Delaware? And I like that compensation package Elon got, and it looks like I can't get that in Delaware. So I don't want to be in Delaware. Right? If you're a lawyer, and there's this law firm, Wilson Sonsini, which is the law firm that represented Twitter when they sued Elon to complete the transaction. Delaware status as the favored corporate home, reflections, because they try to minimize I read the article. They're trying to minimize. Oh, that's not really that big of a deal. And there's all these advantages to Delaware, yada yada yada. There's all these problems with Nevada and Texas, yada yada yada. Yeah, nobody's fucking hiring Wilson Sonsini anymore to incorporate them because you guys aren't dealing with this reality. You guys helped drive this, right? So you've got, according to law firm Wilson Sonsini, Delaware's plaintiffs bar is increasingly active and successful. As a result, companies incorporated in Delaware now need to plan for gotcha litigation, often driven by plaintiffs' lawyers more than lawyers' individual clients. And there's also the Delaware's embrace of the value-destroying combination of aggressive plaintiffs' attorneys and environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, activism. This is what's happening in Delaware. That's Delaware's screwed. Nevada and Texas in particular is not going to play this ESG game. They're not going to support plaintiffs' lawyers. There's some change in Texas law that's helping that. Plaintiffs' lawyers seeking this large fee. If they get it, the windfall will go to them and their firms. Strange world, to quote law professors, in which lawyers who sue companies propose to be paid like superstars, while executives who build them can't. I don't think I even read this before I posted my post. At least when public company CEOs get filthy rich through value creation, pensioners and individual stockholders also benefit. We don't benefit with these plaintiffs' lawyers getting paid. We lose. Over the last few years, Delaware courts have also been increasingly receptive to cases alleging breaches of oversight by directors. Investors should beware. Corporate lawfare, that's the word that Elon used about this. Corporate lawfare is an expensive distraction from business growth. Bill Barr, Jonathan Berry observed, Delaware's corporate law elder statesmen today advocate that the state should adopt a more assertive and explicitly pro-ESG corporate law. Executives can be liable for failing to manage so-called risks that can correspond to du jour ESG issues like climate change, diversity, equity, inclusion, and Me Too, or even the 2020 presidential election. Delaware's courts also affect tort law claims because plaintiffs can file claims in the state of incorporation. Dominion filed against Fox News in Delaware. Other states are offering businesses less regulatory and litigation risk. TripAdvisor said sayonara to Delaware and reincorporated in Nevada. The travel platform explained the move would save about $250,000 a year in taxes and provide potentially greater protection from unmeritorious litigation for directors and officers. Well, that's $250,000 a year Delaware is not getting from just one company. I don't think it's really about the money. It's really about the unmeritorious litigation. This litigation is extraordinarily expensive, way more than $250,000. Tesla probably spent tens of millions of dollars, if not $100 million, fighting this litigation. Not to mention what the attorney's fees would be if they have to pay those. It's not the only company bailing. Since April, Nevada's Democratic Secretary of State said 3 more publicly traded companies have announced plans to shift to Nevada, and these sorts of legal shenanigans are a big reason why. Texas shows states can become more business-friendly. As recently as the early 2000s, trial lawyers were one of the most powerful political forces in Texas. That was before Texans for lawsuit reform worked with lawmakers and pushed through historic tort reform that energized the state's business climate. Texas has continued to build on its reputation as a place where companies can count on fair and transparent regulatory system, a new dedicated business court, which will rival Delaware's Chancery Court. You're getting all the benefits of Delaware without the costs of Delaware. So why am I going through all this? Imagine you're the lawyers who are friends with this judge, right? Because there's an argument that the law firm that she worked for was tied to Biden, and there's all these lawyers that are friends. When you're a judge, you've got a lot of friends who are lawyers. And all these lawyers in Delaware are starting to recognize, holy crap, our cash cow is going to run. Our cash cow is already starting to lead. If she does not change this decision, there may be an appeal, right? Tesla might win an appeal. That would be in 2025. That might be towards the end of 2025 that Tesla would win its appeal. If we get an appeal and Tesla wins an appeal, we won't know that till the end of 2025. How much more bleeding will there be? If she turns around and says today, you know what? I see the shareholder vote. It was fully informed. I'm going back. I'm going to correct this. The package is reinstated. I'm approving the move to Texas. Now, all of a sudden, Delaware doesn't look so hostile, right? And, it's one thing, maybe she's lining herself up for a federal judgeship from Joe Biden or something like that. Maybe she's going to get she thinks she's going to get some kind of reward. But she's going to be hated by the entire Delaware bar, by all the lawyers in Delaware. The vast majority of lawyers in Delaware are going to hate her guts for wrecking their economy, wrecking their business model. So that's my hope. My hope is, number one, she recognizes, hey, A big chunk of my decision was based on that the shareholders' vote was uninformed. The shareholders were now fully informed, and I recognize that the shareholder vote was overwhelming, and I need to respect the will of the shareholders. Maybe. Hopefully they're able to find some way forward to do that. I'm less worried now about Elon leaving because he has the confidence of the shareholders now, and so most likely the move to Texas will go through, even if the compensation package doesn't go through. And then 2025, they just reaffirm the compensation package again in 2025, and Elon gets his comp under Texas law rather than under Delaware law. So let me get to the chat. Stefan Bedard says, how about the pretext that this lawsuit is supposed to benefit shareholders? It's very clear that this lawsuit does not benefit shareholders, especially after the new vote. That's the issue. Why are we discussing Delaware still? We should discuss the crumbling of the U.S. in general. Well, that's not this channel. There's plenty of channels out there to discuss the crumbling of the U.S. in general. I'm spending most of my time in Asia. I don't think the U.S. is crumbling that badly, and we'll see what happens. But I do think there's serious economic problems in the U.S. The plaintiff's lawyer is not short-sighted. On the contrary, they know exactly what they're doing. All they see are dollar signs. Well, they see dollar signs for themselves, but the damage that this does, like, yeah, if they get $1 billion windfall, then they don't have to make money the rest of their lives, right? They'll still try to make money, but their lawsuit opportunities are going to dry up. But it's everyone else in Delaware, all the other lawyers in Delaware who are getting screwed by it, and all the other business interests that are connected to this that are screwed by it. Mark says, Judge said she doesn't care about the shareholders. Well, she said it last time. Although she said the shareholders were not fully informed. And now that the shareholders have been fully informed, you have to ask yourself, does it make sense to award outsized compensation to lawyers who don't care about shareholders, or to award outsized compensation to Elon, who does care about shareholders and who the shareholders voted to award that outsized compensation to? Some companies will probably get a good service in Delaware. Yeah, but the problem is you don't know whether you're on the good guy's side or the bad guy's side until the ball drops. Elon was friendly with Obama. Elon got along great with Obama. Then all of a sudden there's a new president elected, and all of a sudden you're on the bad side. You don't know when you're on the good side and the bad side. You want a state where the courts are reliable and not a state where the courts play favorites. Because you're a favorite now, you won't necessarily be a favorite later. Why does every description of the increase in the stock's value only look at the share price and miss the stock has split 15x since 2018? I think it's market cap rather than share price. Someone has to look into him, Elon, and his minions obliged. Yeah, that's exactly true. I mean, it's pretty clear that this is driven by anti-Elon sentiment, driven by the Democratic Party, driven by Biden. I don't know how much this particular judge is influenced by that. I can say that when I read her decision, I felt that she was biased. I felt she cherry-picked facts. She decided the result she wanted, and then she found facts to support them and ignored facts that didn't support the result that she wanted. If shareholder will is important, do you think this conflicts with the idea of super shares or special share classes for execs and founders? I think that more founders are going to go to. I don't know. Have an answer to shareholder will. The super shares. Those founders are now the dominant shareholders, so that they are the interest. And when you buy stock in a company where there's that special class of shares that the founders have, you've bought into that. And if you believe in founders, and I do tend to believe in founders, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's better that the founders of a company who have a large stake in the company have more control over the company than Vanguard, BlackRock, and judges in Delaware. What do you think will move Tesla, the stock? Vehicle growth is. I don't worry about the short-term growth of the stock, the short-term share price. I think what will move Tesla stock price long-term is robotaxi and Optimus and AI. I think making a few more cars and selling a few more cars, certainly if interest rates come down, then the profits on cars will go up and that will look better in the short term. But I don't really care whether the stock goes up 20% in the next year. I care whether the stock goes up 10x in the next 5 years, or 20x in the next 10 years, or 50x. That's the stuff. I'm not in this company for like a 20% gain over the next year. I'm in this company for a much larger gain over a longer period of time. I'm a long-term investor. I'm not a short-term investor. I'm not a trader. What will move the stock within the next 2 to 3 years? I think we're going to see FSD cross the threshold and the robotaxi network go live. I think the robotaxi network goes live probably 2025, maybe trials in late 2024. We'll see. Elon lives in a tiny home and with friends while traveling. Yeah, Elon does not live a life of luxury. He's not running around in yachts. He does have a private jet so he can get where he needs to go. Elon works. He doesn't live the life of luxury. He didn't have Jeff Bezos' yacht that they had to remove a bridge to get out of a port. That's not Elon. Lawyers have been sus forever, but now the 2020s is the judges we can't trust. Judges have always been suspect. Lawyers have always been suspect. I would say by and large, the vast majority of the American legal system is fair, but you have high profile. And when we do have a situation where the current administration, the current president of the United States, has decided to bend the law to pursue political opposition. I don't think there's any question about that. And I'm not a Donald Trump fan. Okay, I think the prosecutions of Donald Trump are bogus, but I'm not a Trump fan. I don't like Trump. I think Trump's a bullshitter. But Biden is abusing the legal. We're supposed to be a nation with a rule of law, and Biden is abusing the rule of law, and that's very dangerous. And I don't think Trump did not prosecute Hillary. Like, Trump could have prosecuted Hillary, and he did not prosecute Hillary. So I don't like Trump, but I'll give him credit for some things. Bucket 3 Production says, will Model Y Juniper come out in 2024? Elon said no. First of all, I don't think he's agreed that there is such a thing as Juniper, but a refresh of Model Y is probably coming in 2025, maybe. I am planning on buying a current Model Y this year in the next couple of months. I might change my mind to get a new Model 3. I'm a little torn on that one. I think that the higher ground clearance is going to matter in Thailand. From what I hear, the Model 3 rides better than the Model Y, so I got to go experience that. But yeah, Elon said not this year. There's no refresh of Model Y coming this year. There's a whole bunch of other stuff happening this year and early next year that they said in the slide deck for Q1. There's other vehicles coming soon. Not Model Y, not Model 3. Something more affordable is coming. Something else might be coming. Do I miss Plaid? I don't actually miss driving that much. I have a good life here, mostly in Thailand. I just spent 2 weeks in Japan. I'm traveling around a bit. I've been in Vietnam and Cambodia and Malaysia. I prefer mass transit in general, where I can access it. Although I think that when I get the model, that my Tesla in a couple of months, we're going to start driving around Thailand, Malaysia, and maybe other countries in Southeast Asia, do some road trips. And that's why the Model Y might be better, because you can sleep. If we decide to sleep in the Model Y, it's doable. It's better to sleep in the Model Y than it is in the Model 3. And also, more ground clearance is going to be better in some circumstances. More cargo space is going to be better for some circumstances. Have I test driven the Highland Model 3? Okay, it's not Highland. It's a refresh. It's the new Model 3. I haven't driven it yet. I've ridden in it. It's fine. DeWiz says, cannot compare Hillary and Trump prosecutions. No comparison. I'm not sure I agree with that. I think we can agree that Trump, there was an argument for prosecuting Hillary, and Trump decided not to prosecute her. And I don't think there was much of an argument for prosecuting Trump, and Biden went ahead and prosecuted him anyway. Erie asks, have I found myself a girlfriend? I have been dating a woman that I'm very happy with for 5 months now, almost 6 months. And we're doing really well. We just went to Japan together for 2 weeks. And we've been to Malaysia together for a week, and we road tripped to Thailand for a week, and we're basically living together. So I think it's going really well. What charging standard do they use in Thailand? I think they use CCS in Thailand. I think that there's a growing number of Tesla superchargers, but I think Teslas can charge at other chargers. There's a lot of BYDs here. There's a lot of other electric vehicles. There's more EVs here in Thailand than there are in Japan. Like, striking to me that there's more EVs here in Thailand than there are in Japan. How do I think FSD and Robotaxi will perform in Vietnam? I think FSD and Robotaxi will perform better than human anywhere when it's better than human. The question is it better than human? Once it's better than human, it's better than human. Will they have to train it a little bit for certain contexts? Yes, but once it's better than human, it's better than human. It's that simple. Baby coming soon. No baby coming yet. She is not pregnant yet. More than in Sweden. What was the more than in Sweden question? Oh, more EVs than in Sweden. I doubt it. I haven't been to Sweden. I was just in Japan and I was disappointed at the very small number of electric vehicles I saw. Lots of hybrids, but very few battery electric vehicles in Japan, and there's tons of them. I keep seeing more and more of them in Thailand. I saw them in Malaysia. A lot of VinFast in Vietnam, not a lot of others in Vietnam. Not much in Cambodia. I think I saw one Tesla in 5 days in Cambodia. But all right, so I've gone for over an hour. I think I've addressed everything I wanted to address. I don't want to get into politics any more than I already have. Yes, cheers to Tesla Boomer Mama. I think she did a good job in helping out with the vote. I'm deeply concerned. I'm much less concerned about the impact of this Delaware litigation. If the judge screws Elon over again, she's screwing Delaware. As long as the move to Texas goes through, which I think is likely, I don't think the judge is going to interfere with the move to Texas. There's some other lawsuits that are going to try to interfere with the move to Texas, but I think the move to Texas is going to go through. Then they can fix his compensation next year if they have to. What thing or things do you think might be a surprise in Elon's next master plan, like air conditioners, boats, planes? No, I think next master plan is about AI. He was specifically asked about HVAC in the shareholder meeting, and he said they want to do it, but it's not a high priority. I think that Master Plan 3 is going ahead, and Master Plan 3 is about accelerating the transition to sustainable energy, globally, with all the things that they talked about in Master Plan 3. I think my guess is Master Plan 4 is about AI. If Master Plan 3 goes ahead, but Master Plan 4 is about AI. I wonder if the 4680 dry process that Sandy reported is related to the Austin cathode plant coming online. I believe that the Austin cathode plant is relevant to the dry process. I would recommend following the limiting factor channel. He talks more about that stuff. I don't know whether they're doing dry cathode or not yet. Fund managers want to see something real and not talk about the future. Any possible items on August 8th? I don't care what fund managers want to see. This is not a channel for fund managers who are looking to bump the stock by 5% in the next few weeks. Right? That's not what this channel is about. This channel is about the long term. The long term is looking good because Elon now has a vote of confidence from the shareholders, and he's going to stay with the company and he's going to continue to innovate. And whether the Delaware judge screws Elon over or not, the damage that is done by the Delaware judge screwing over Elon is damage to Delaware, not damage to Elon or Tesla. Tesla and Elon will recover from it. It'll cost them some money, but they'll recover from it. Delaware is not, it's already deeply in trouble and they may never recover. But if she does not fix this ASAP, Delaware is screwed. Refresh, interesting. A Model 3 refresh is a refresh. So PYG KLB says he drove a refresh Model 3, nice car, but not so much that he wants to trade in his upside down Y for it. I assume he means he's in debt on the Model Y. Yeah, no, look, I don't have any hostility towards the people of Delaware or the lawyers in Delaware. I think there's a lot of lawyers in Delaware who value the way the system was before, where shareholder primacy was important. There's a small subset of lawyers in Delaware who have pushed a different direction and they got too much power and too much influence, and they may have screwed over everybody. What happens with the $5 billion litigation lawyers bounty? In the document, I didn't clip it. In the document, the lawyers, there's another document with their request for fee. I think they acknowledge that. I think that they're not really looking for the 5 billion. They're looking for $1 billion. It has to do with something called Lodestar. I don't want to dive into plaintiffs' lawyers' fees and how that stuff works out. I think they're actually shooting for somewhere north of $1 billion. They don't really think they're going to get 5 billion. I think that's where this is heading. Do I see Musk opening up investment from Tesla long-term shareholders in his other companies anytime soon? No. I think that Starlink will IPO maybe in 2025. And Elon has said that Tesla shareholders will get access before others. I'm not sure how he does that. I don't think any of his other companies are likely to go public anytime soon. So the only potential investment opportunity that I think we're going to see in the near future, as in the next couple of years, might be 2026, is a Starlink IPO. Yeah. And I just would like, there's a mention, the unknown says AI is such a slow learner. So I've been using ChatGPT a lot. I actually think ChatGPT 4.0 got worse than ChatGPT 4. It's sort of like less insightful. I don't know how to put it in a different way. It's more like agreeable and less insightful, and it doesn't really offer as useful thoughts as it did. It's still good, but not as good as it was. I've just started using Claude, which is Anthropic's AI, which I think is an offshoot from the people who left OpenAI. I use Grok a lot. I think Grok is still short of OpenAI's ChatGPT, but I think there's a new version of Grok coming that will probably be better. Yeah, I don't know if it's possible to give early access to the investments. I'm not sure how that would work. Have I tried Perplexity AI? I think I've tried it, but I'm not sure. I'll take a look at that. Tesla needs cash for expansion. So I had the theory that Tesla should spin off the supercharger network as an IPO because the supercharger network is fundamentally a utility. So if Tesla spun off the supercharger network as an IPO, I could see it having a $10 billion valuation. The company getting the new startup getting $2 billion in cash from issuing 20% stock, Tesla selling 20% stock, getting itself $2 billion in cash, and that leaves Tesla still owning 60% of the supercharger network company, but now it's publicly traded, and now Tesla has $2 billion in cash to put into AI, and the supercharger company now has $2 billion in cash to put into building out more superchargers. But I don't think they're going to do it. Is buying a Tesla for the robotaxi network a good investment, not investment advice? I guess I would say no. It's unclear. It's unclear to me whether it's I have bought for that reason, and so far I have been disappointed. I'm holding my 2018 Model 3 in part for that purpose and in part just for sentimental value. I don't know if it's a better investment than buying Tesla stock. I'll put it that way. I think buying Tesla stock might be a better, and this is not investment advice, of course. PYG KLB says, I hope to see mobile Starlink for Teslas soon. I think that Scott Walter took a Starlink antenna and put it in his car and drove around with it, and he did effectively have, I think maybe Teslatino, Teslatino, Raphael, I think he put a Starlink in his Cybertruck. So there are mobile Starlinks for Teslas already. I don't think it's necessary. I think if you have a cell phone connection, you have enough bandwidth for your car in almost every circumstance. So I think it's overrated. Like if you're driving the car, how much, like the bandwidth on a Starlink is so high, like what exactly are you doing with all that bandwidth? 5G is good enough. Yes, I have been away for a while. Just a little background personally. We went to Japan. I've been back for we got back on the 19th. It's the 22nd here in Thailand now. We got back on the night of the 19th, so I've been back for basically a little more than 2 days. Two great weeks in Japan. I am working on the first video for the Bikini Nomad channel. That bikini shopping in Japan was underwhelming. We did find the bikini in Japan. It was not what I was looking for, but it's okay. And of course, my girlfriend looks good in anything. But there will be brief bikini shots of my girlfriend in the video. But mostly the video is about traveling in Japan and the idea of the channel, which is what is life like as a nomad and what are different places like as a nomad from my perspective as an American man and from my girlfriend's perspective as a professional Thai woman who also looks good in the bikini. But her perspective, what does she see that's different about these places and what does she see as valuable and what do I see as valuable? What's great about this? What's great about that? So the first video will be less nomad oriented. We're going to talk about some nomad issues with Miyazaki Japan and Aoshima Japan, and we're going to talk about nomad issues a little, but future videos will focus more on the nomad approach. This first video, we were tourists. We weren't really nomads in the way I would describe it. My girlfriend had never been to Japan. I've been to Japan. I nomaded in Japan before for 3 months in Nagoya, so I can talk a lot about nomad life. So that's coming. So Bikini Nomad is a channel. On search YouTube for Bikini Nomad channel, and the channel will come up. How young is your bikini model? My girlfriend is 36 years old, and looks absolutely gorgeous. And I'm sure some people are going to say she's not pretty or whatever, and I don't care. And if anybody makes negative comments about her appearance, I'm just going to hide you from the channel. That's the other channel. It's not going to be on this channel. And I'm going to create an account on X for the channel as well. So the videos will air simultaneously on X and on YouTube. And I would encourage people to follow me on X. It's WR4NYGov. Thank you, DeWiz, for hanging out. It's always possible there will be other bikini models that'll appear in our videos in the future, but it's not really about bikinis. It's really about nomads. What is nomad life like? And we like beaches, so a lot of the videos are going to be beach oriented in Thailand. There's a lot of it's going to be Thailand. It's probably going to be half Thailand or more than half Thailand, going to different places in Thailand. What's nomad life like in this spot in Thailand? We'll also, because we'll have the car, we'll go to Malaysia, which is drivable. We'll go to maybe Cambodia, maybe Vietnam, if that's drivable, maybe Laos. Laos doesn't have any beaches. Cambodia and Vietnam do. But that's rough idea there. So, all right. I think we've covered everything I wanted to cover, and then some. We need to unveil the VTOL. VTOL's dead. VTOL will never go anywhere. Robotaxi and boring company tunnel systems and hyperloops are going to make VTOL irrelevant. It's my opinion. We can talk about that sometime in the future. So thanks everybody so much for watching. We'll talk to you soon.